I woke up in a hospital room, the air thick with antiseptic and beeping machines. My mouth was dry, my body heavy. I tried to move, but a burning ache tore through my side. The nurse smiled and said, "You're lucky to be alive, sweetheart." Lucky. That word still echoes in my head, because within hours I'd learned that surviving the crash wasn't the miracle. The real miracle was how calmly my own family had destroyed me while I was unconscious. My name is Alyssa Grant. I'm 26, a nurse's assistant in a small Ohio town. I've spent my life caring for people. Strangers, mostly. My dream was to finish nursing school, buy a small house, maybe adopt a dog. Simple things. My family wasn't perfect, but I thought we were close enough. My brother Ethan was the golden boy. 3 years older, quick-talking, funny, and always a little bit of trouble. Every time he blew up a job or racked up debt, our mom, Linda, smoothed it over. "He's just figuring things out," she'd say, as if figuring things out required a permanent audience and my paycheck. Dad, Charles, worked double shifts at the mill and kept quiet. Silence was his way of surviving Mom's moods. When Ethan lied, Dad would just sigh and say, "He's your brother. Family sticks together." I grew up believing that meant something. The night everything fell apart started after one of those endless double shifts at the clinic. I was running on caffeine and adrenaline, cleaning up after an elderly patient who'd mistaken me for her granddaughter. She hugged me before I left and said, "You've got a good heart, honey. Don't let anyone break it." If only I'd known. Outside, rain slicked the parking lot. I called my best friend Jenna, half laughing, half dead on my feet. "Tomorrow I'm sleeping until noon," I said. "No, you're not," she teased. "We're getting pancakes. My treat." "Fine," I groaned, "but I'm ordering everything." That was the last normal conversation I had. I remember headlights flashing too close, the scream of tires, the crunch of metal, then darkness. When I woke, I thought the pain was from the crash, but it wasn't just the bruises. It was deeper, sharper, like something inside me had been carved out. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand, smiling like this was any ordinary recovery. "Good news," he said. "Your vitals are strong. The surgery was a success." I blinked. "Surgery?" He hesitated. "The kidney donation. Your brother explained everything before the procedure." My chest went cold. "What donation?" The smile slipped. "You signed a consent form, Ms. Grant." He flipped through the chart. "It was witnessed by—" "I was in a coma," I cut in. "How could I sign anything?" He froze, eyes darting to the monitor, then to me. "I'll, check with administration." He left so fast the curtain fluttered behind him. I pressed the call button again and again, demanding answers until the door opened and my family walked in. Ethan first, hair slicked back, wearing that grin he used when he was about to lie. Mom followed, arms crossed. Dad hovered behind them, staring at the floor. "Hey, sis," Ethan said softly. "You scared us." "What did you do?" I whispered. He tried to take my hand. "It's fine. You're okay." "Don't touch me." "What did you do?" Mom sighed, irritated, like I was overreacting. "He needed the money, Alyssa. You're young, healthy. You don't need 2 kidneys." I just stared at her. "You let him do this?" She folded her arms tighter. "You wouldn't understand. Ethan was desperate. You can't watch your child fall apart and do nothing." "I was unconscious," I said, voice breaking. "You stole from me." Ethan's charm cracked for a moment. "You're alive, aren't you? I'll pay you back, I swear. It's just temporary." Temporary. Like he'd borrowed a sweater, not an organ. Dad still hadn't said a word. He just kept looking down, hands shoved in his pockets, as if silence could hide him from what they'd done. The nurse peeked in, eyes wide, clearly hearing the shouting. Mom smiled sweetly and said, "Family talk, we'll keep it down." When they left, I felt the room collapse. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I pressed my hand over the bandages on my side and realized the truth. A part of me was missing, and the people who took it were the ones who were supposed to protect me. That night, I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling until the morphine blurred the edges of everything. I thought about every time I'd covered for Ethan, every dollar I'd lent him, every lecture from Mom about loyalty. Loyalty. That word meant nothing now, because when I needed them to protect me, they sold me instead. I survived the accident, but waking up was the real crash. The moment I understood that family doesn't always mean love, sometimes it's just the people who know exactly where to cut. And I hadn't even begun to fight back. I spent the next few days drifting in and out of sleep, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. Maybe the doctor misspoke. Maybe Ethan had misunderstood. But every time I moved, the sharp pull in my side reminded me that something inside me was gone. When I asked the nurses about the surgery, they hesitated, glancing at one another before changing the subject. The silence around me was suffocating. I started watching their eyes, how they avoided mine, how their smiles tightened when they looked at my chart. They knew. Everyone knew. The doctor finally came back on the third day. I demanded answers. "You performed a surgery without my consent," I said. "How is that even legal?" He adjusted his glasses, avoiding my gaze. "Ms. Grant, your brother presented signed documentation. The hospital verified the paperwork." "I was unconscious." He sighed. "If that's true, you can file a complaint with the board, but the procedure is done. You're medically stable." Medically stable. As if that was supposed to make me whole again. When I was discharged, Ethan picked me up. Mom had insisted he drive because he owed me a favor. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, watching the highway blur past. "I'll make it right," he said finally. "You don't know what kind of trouble I was in." "You mean the kind that makes you sell your sister's organ? Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I turned toward him. "You forged my name, Ethan. You mutilated me." He slammed the steering wheel, eyes flashing. "I was desperate. You think I wanted this?" I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, you wanted it enough to do it." When we pulled into Mom and Dad's driveway, she came rushing out like we were returning from a vacation. "There's my brave girl," she said, hugging me tightly. I went limp in her arms. "Your family," she whispered. "We do what we must for each other." Something inside me cracked. I didn't yell, I didn't push her away, I just felt hollow. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the familiar glow-in-the-dark stars, still stuck to the ceiling. I used to make wishes on them as a kid. Now I wished I could disappear. Over the next weeks, I tried to get answers, legal, medical, any kind. I called the hospital administrator, the police, even a lawyer recommended by a nurse at work. Everyone said the same thing. The consent forms looked legitimate. The signature matched mine. Ethan's story, that I had agreed before the crash, was apparently credible. The officer at the precinct actually said, "If your brother says you gave permission and there's no evidence of coercion, we can't file charges." I hung up on him. Jenna visited a few days later. When she saw the bandage, she gasped. "Alyssa, that's not just wrong, it's criminal." I nodded, but my voice shook. "No one believes me. My mom told the doctor I'd signed the papers before the accident. She even forged a witness line." Jenna grabbed my hands. "Then we find proof. You work in healthcare. You know paper trails always exist." Her determination kept me breathing. I started collecting everything. Emails from the hospital, discharge notes, billing statements. Each piece felt like a fragment of truth, but nothing tied it together yet. Meanwhile, Ethan acted like life was normal. He'd show up with groceries, pretending to care. Mom would cook, humming like the house wasn't full of secrets. Dad stayed in his recliner, watching muted TV. One night during dinner, I asked, "Do you ever think about what you did to me?" Ethan froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "You're still mad?" Mom cut in quickly. "Enough, Alyssa. We've moved on. You should, too." I set my glass down hard. "You mean pretend it never happened?" Her eyes hardened. "You've always been ungrateful. Your brother is family. He needed help." "Help?" I whispered. "You call stealing an organ help?" She stood, slamming her napkin on the table. "You can either forgive or leave this house." So I left. I moved back to my apartment, weaker than before, but determined not to die in silence. Every breath hurt, but the anger kept me alive. I stopped answering their calls. I blocked Ethan's number. Weeks turned into months. I watched the scar fade, but felt the ache deepen. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. Ethan's face hovering over me, surgical lights glaring, my mother's voice saying I didn't need 2 kidneys. Sometimes I'd wake up screaming, but one morning, something shifted. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a victim. I saw someone who'd survived what should have destroyed her, someone who could fight back. That day, I filed a formal complaint with the medical board. I sent copies of every document I'd gathered, signed statements, and the dates that proved I'd been unconscious when they claimed I'd signed. The investigation would take months, maybe longer, but I didn't care. For the first time since the crash, I felt a pulse of power in my chest. Ethan thought he could silence me with guilt. Mom thought loyalty would keep me quiet. They were both wrong. The accident had taken my kidney, but what they didn't realize was that it had also given me something stronger: clarity. I was done being the forgiving sister. The next time I saw them, it wouldn't be for forgiveness. It would be for justice. The months after I filed the complaint were a blur of waiting, paperwork, and frustration. The medical board moved slower than I thought humanly possible. Every email began with, "We appreciate your patience." Patience wasn't what I had left. I'd gone back to light duty at the clinic. I thought returning to work would distract me. But every beep of a monitor, every smell of disinfectant, dragged me back to that hospital room. Sometimes I'd catch myself touching the scar under my shirt, still numb in spots, and my stomach would twist. The only person who kept me anchored was Jenna. She checked in daily, sometimes dropping by with takeout or just sitting with me while we said nothing. She was the one who reminded me to eat, to keep copies of every document, to believe I wasn't crazy. One night, over cheap pizza and paperwork spread across my kitchen table, she asked, "What happens if the investigation goes nowhere?" I stared at the stack of files. "Then I make sure everyone knows what they did." She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You mean public?" "I mean legal," I said. "But if the system won't listen, I'll find someone who will." A week later, that someone appeared in the form of Detective Marcus Hale, a contact Jenna knew from her cousin who worked in law enforcement. Marcus specialized in medical fraud and consent violations. When I met him at a coffee shop, he listened carefully while I told him everything, from the crash to the forged documents. Unlike everyone else, he didn't interrupt, didn't ask if I was sure. When I finished, he said quietly, "If what you're saying is true, your brother didn't just commit fraud, he committed organ trafficking. That's a felony." Hearing those words out loud sent a shiver down my spine. For months I'd been told it was a family misunderstanding. Now someone was finally calling it what it was: a crime. We started working together discreetly. Marcus helped me get official copies of hospital records, timestamps from security cameras, and a handwriting expert's analysis. The expert confirmed what I already knew. My signature on the consent form was forged. Piece by piece, the story came together. Ethan had bribed a low-level hospital clerk to push the paperwork through. The buyer had transferred money into a shell account connected to Ethan's friend. My mother had signed as a witness. My father's name wasn't on anything. His hands were technically clean, though his silence made him just as guilty in my eyes. When Marcus handed me the file, thick with evidence, he said, "This is enough for the district attorney to take interest. But the decision to prosecute, especially when it's family, is tough. Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the folder, feeling the weight of it, of every sleepless night and every betrayal stuffed between those pages. Then I looked up. I've been ready since the day I woke up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off. I kept thinking about my mother's face, calm and self-righteous as she'd said, "He needed the money more than you need 2 kidneys." Something inside me hardened. Forgiveness wasn't healing anymore. It was poison. So I planned something I knew they'd never see coming. I called Mom first. "Hey," I said softly, trying to sound hesitant, "I've been thinking about what happened." There was a pause. Then her voice warmed immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd understand eventually. Family fights, but blood is thicker than—" "Let's have dinner," I interrupted. "Just us, like old times." She sounded delighted. "Of course, I'll make your favorite. Roast chicken. Sunday at 7? "Perfect," I said. "And Mom, invite Dad and Ethan too. I want everyone together." When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but anticipation. I called Marcus next. "Sunday, 7 p.m., I told him. "That's when I want this to happen." He hesitated. "You're sure you can handle seeing them?" "Oh, I can handle it," I said. "I've been rehearsing this moment for months." Over the next few days, I prepared like I was going to war. I practiced what I'd say in front of the mirror until my voice no longer trembled. I boxed up the evidence, copies of transfers, the forged form, the expert report, and labeled everything clearly for the prosecutor. Jenna tried to talk me out of being there when the arrest happened. "You could just let the police handle it," she said. "You don't owe them a show." But I shook my head. No, they took my voice. This time, they're going to hear it. By Sunday evening, I was calm, eerily calm. I put on a simple black dress, tied my hair back, and drove to my parents' house with a folder in my bag and the prosecutor on standby. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw them through the window. Mom bustling in the kitchen, Dad setting the table, Ethan laughing like nothing had ever happened. For a second, a tiny part of me wanted to turn around to pretend I could still love them the way I used to. But then I touched the scar on my side, and that thought vanished. They had taken something from me that no apology could return. Now, I was taking something back. Sunday came faster than I expected. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than it had ever been, though I'd taken that road 100 times before. The autumn sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed down on you, daring you to turn back. But I wasn't turning back. Not this time. When I pulled into the driveway, I could already hear laughter through the open kitchen window. The sound hit me like a punch. For months I'd imagined this moment as dark and silent, but they were inside, joking as if nothing had happened. The smell of roast chicken and rosemary drifted through the air, my favorite dish. My mother really had gone all out. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and forced a smile before knocking. Mom opened the door, face glowing. "Alyssa, you look beautiful." She pulled me into a hug that I didn't return. "Thanks, Mom," I said quietly. She stepped back, studying me. "It means so much that you're here. We can finally put everything behind us." "Yeah," I said. "That's the plan." Ethan appeared in the hallway, sleeves rolled up, a wine glass in his hand. "There's my little sister. Look at you all grown up." I clenched my jaw. "Hi, Ethan." He grinned, oblivious or pretending to be. "Come on, let's eat before Dad falls asleep at the table." We sat down, plates filled, candles flickering between us. For a few minutes, the only sounds were silverware and the clinking of glasses. I watched them all carefully, Mom chatting about the neighbors, Dad quietly nodding, Ethan bragging about a new business venture, the same family rhythm that had always drowned me out. Halfway through dinner, Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "See? It feels good to have everyone together again. You've always been so sensitive, Alyssa. You just needed time." I looked at her, my voice calm. "Time hasn't changed what you did." The table went still. Ethan set down his fork. "Are we really doing this now?" "Yes," I said. "Now's perfect." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Honey, let's not ruin the evening." "Ruin it?" I leaned forward. "Dad, my kidney is gone. Ethan sold it. Mom helped him forge my signature. The evening was ruined before I ever got here." Mom's eyes flashed with warning. "You're being cruel. We made a mistake." "No," I said sharply. "You made a decision. You decided I was worth less than him." Ethan's voice rose. "I was drowning, Alyssa. You don't understand what I was facing." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand stealing from your own sister." The air thickened. Mom's face hardened into that familiar look, the one she used when she'd already decided the conversation was over. "Enough. We are not dragging strangers into family matters. We move on." I smiled faintly. "That's the thing, Mom. We're not the only ones at dinner." The knock on the door was perfectly timed. 3 sharp raps. Dad frowned. "Who could that be?" I stood, heart pounding but steady. "I'll get it." When I opened the door, Prosecutor Daniel Reed stood there, trench coat still damp from the rain, a folder under his arm. His expression was calm, professional, but his presence filled the room behind me with sudden silence. Dad's voice wavered. "Who is this man?" I stepped aside. "This is the man who's here to arrest your son." The color drained from Ethan's face. "What?" Daniel stepped forward. "Ethan Grant, you are under investigation for medical fraud and illegal organ trafficking. You have the right to remain silent." Mom shot up from her chair. "You can't do this. This is family business." Daniel ignored her, pulling documents from his folder. We have the hospital's security footage, the forged consent form, and records of the payment transfer into your account. You'll need to come with me." Ethan stood, panic flashing across his features. "Alyssa, you don't know what you're doing. You're destroying our family." I met his eyes. "You did that the moment you sold me." He lunged toward me, desperate, but 2 officers entered behind the prosecutor, restraining him. Mom screamed, tears streaking her makeup. "How could you do this to your brother? He made a mistake." I faced her squarely. "And you helped him make it." Dad finally spoke, voice shaking. "Linda, she's right." He looked at me with something between shame and sorrow. I should have stopped this. For the first time, my mother didn't have a reply. She just sank into her chair, trembling. Ethan's voice cracked as they led him toward the door. "I'll never forgive you, Alyssa." I didn't look away. I can live with that. The door closed behind them, leaving only the ticking of the wall clock and the smell of burnt candles. The house that had always felt so full suddenly felt enormous and empty. Mom whispered almost to herself, "What happens to us now?" I turned toward her. "Whatever comes next, I can finally breathe." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person standing there. Maybe she didn't. The daughter who'd always stayed quiet was gone. I picked up my coat, walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in months, the weight in my chest began to lift. The wind was sharp, the sky endless. Behind me, the house stayed silent. The battle wasn't over, but justice had finally walked through their door. The night the prosecutor took Ethan away, I drove until sunrise. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed distance. From that house, from the memories that clung to it like smoke. I parked by Lake Erie, stepped out into the cold air, and watched the water turn gold with morning light. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like something was pressing down on my chest. But freedom wasn't peace. Freedom was empty. It was quiet in a way that made every thought echo. The next few weeks were a blur of hearings, interviews, and endless paperwork. Detective Marcus kept me updated almost daily. The evidence had held. Ethan's fingerprints on the forged form, the financial trail, the clerk's confession that he'd been bribed. My brother wasn't just guilty, he was caught. The district attorney called me in to testify. Sitting in that courtroom was harder than I expected. Ethan avoided my eyes at first, but when the judge asked if I wished to make a statement, he finally looked at me. Anger, shame, and something like disbelief tangled in his expression. I stood anyway. "I used to think loyalty meant silence," I told the court, "but silence only protects the guilty. What they did to me wasn't a family matter. It was theft of my body, my trust, and my safety. I won't be silent anymore." My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. When the sentence came, 8 years for medical fraud and organ trafficking, I didn't feel joy. Just a tired kind of relief, the kind you feel when you finally stop bleeding. Mom didn't attend the trial. She called once afterward, her voice brittle. "You've ruined us," she said. "Your brother's life is over." "No, Mom," I answered quietly. "He ruined us. You just helped him." Then I hung up for the last time. Dad reached out a few weeks later. We met at a small diner off the highway. He looked older, smaller somehow. "I should have protected you," he said, stirring his coffee until it went cold. I thought staying quiet kept the peace. Turns out it just let everything rot. I didn't know how to respond, so I told him the truth. "I wanted to hate you, but I think I just feel sad." He nodded, tears slipping down his face. That was the closest we ever got to forgiveness. With Ethan in prison and my parents out of my life, I tried to rebuild. The hospital offered to cover part of my therapy costs after the board admitted to procedural negligence. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement, and that meant something. Therapy was brutal. Talking about the accident, about the betrayal, about how it changed how I saw myself. It felt like ripping stitches open just to see if the wound would finally heal right. My therapist, Dr. Morales, asked me once, "What do you want moving forward?" I thought for a long time before answering. I want my life back, but maybe not the old one, maybe something new. So I started small. I joined a local support group for victims of medical abuse. Listening to their stories made me realize I wasn't alone, and sharing mine helped others speak up too. I began volunteering at patient rights workshops, using the system that failed me to help people who didn't yet know how to fight it. Jenna never left my side through any of it. One night, she looked at me across my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once planned that dinner, and smiled. "You know," she said, "you don't talk about them anymore." I blinked. "Who?" "Your family." I thought about it and realized she was right. They weren't my world anymore. I'd stopped orbiting around their chaos. There were still hard days, nights when I'd wake up touching the scar, half expecting to feel pain again, but now the pain was different. It was part of me, not something stolen from me. Months later, I visited the lake again, the same spot where I'd gone after the arrest. The water was calm, the sky clear. I sat on the rocks and whispered, "You made it." It wasn't triumph, it was survival. Freedom had a price, and I'd paid it. My family, my innocence, the illusion that love and loyalty were the same thing. But what I got in return was worth more. Truth, self-respect, and a voice that no one could take. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be standing here, stronger, louder, and still whole despite everything, I wouldn't have believed you. I used to think strength meant forgiving people who hurt you. Now I know it means never letting them do it again. Before I left, I took off the small silver bracelet Mom had given me on my 18th birthday and dropped it into the water. It hit the surface with a soft splash, disappearing beneath the ripples. "Goodbye," I whispered. Not to them, but to the version of myself that thought love meant sacrifice. As I drove home, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the road in gold. For the first time in a long time, the reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone I actually recognized. Not the victim, not the daughter, just me. And that was enough. It's been a year since that night. The night my family finally broke apart so I could start healing. Sometimes, when I tell people what happened, they ask me how I could ever move on. The truth is, I didn't. I learned to move through it. Moving on sounds like forgetting, like pretending the scars don't exist. But every time I see the faint line on my side, I'm reminded of what it cost me to find the truth. That scar isn't just a reminder of what they took. It's proof that I survived. In the beginning, I thought revenge would fix everything. I imagined that watching Ethan in handcuffs would make me feel powerful again, that hearing the judge read the verdict would fill the emptiness. But when it happened, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet, still, like standing in the ruins of something that used to be home. Because justice doesn't heal. It just stops the bleeding long enough for you to start doing the work yourself. I spent months trying to understand how a family could do something so cruel. At first, I blamed greed, then desperation. But the truth was simpler and darker. They didn't see me as a person. I was a means to an end, and when someone stops seeing you as human, they can justify anything. My mother used to tell me that family meant sacrifice. She'd say it with pride, like it was the highest form of love. But she left out the part where love without respect is just control. She wanted obedience, not loyalty. Ethan wanted a solution, not forgiveness. And I gave both of them what they wanted for far too long. The hardest part wasn't losing them. It was admitting that they were never really mine to begin with. I was raised to believe love means endurance, but real love doesn't ask you to bleed for it. Real love stands beside you, not on top of you. There was one day in therapy when Dr. Morales asked me, "If you could say one thing to your brother right now, what would it be?" I thought about it for a long time, not about what I'd yell at him, but what I'd actually want him to understand. Finally, I said, "I hope one day you realize what you did, not for my sake, for yours. Because if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life pretending you didn't destroy the only person who would have forgiven you." That's the thing about forgiveness. It's not about giving someone else peace. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their choices. And I'm finally free. I won't lie. Some days, I still miss them. I miss the sound of Dad's laugh when he used to fix things in the garage. I miss the way Mom would hum while she cooked. I even miss the brother I thought I had before everything fell apart. But when I feel that ache, I remind myself that missing the idea of them doesn't mean I owe the reality of them my silence. I built a new kind of family, one made of choice, not blood. Jenna, my best friend, who never asked me to get over it. Dr. Morales, who helped me rebuild the pieces they tried to erase, and the people at the support group who looked at my scar not with pity, but with recognition. Those people became my roots. Sometimes I still visit the lake, the same place I went after the arrest. I stand by the water, close my eyes, and listen. It's peaceful now, like the world finally matches the quiet inside me. I've started speaking at hospitals about patient consent laws. It's strange how life circles back. I used to be terrified of doctors, of anything sterile and white and humming. Now I walk into those same spaces to make sure no one else goes through what I did. Every time I share my story, I feel that old fear shrink a little more. One evening, after one of my talks, a woman came up to me. Her voice was shaky when she said, "Your story gave me the courage to file a report. My sister signed papers for a surgery I didn't want." She started crying. I just hugged her. Because that was the moment I realized something powerful. My pain had purpose now. That's what I want people to understand when they hear my story. Not that betrayal breaks you, but that it teaches you what you deserve. And what I deserved was never silence. So if you're watching this right now and someone has hurt you in a way that made you question your worth, listen to me. You are not the broken one. They are. You are allowed to walk away, even from the people who share your blood. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't apologize for surviving. Because healing isn't about becoming who you were before. It's about becoming someone who can never be hurt that way again. The night I dropped my mother's bracelet into the lake, I didn't just let go of her. I let go of the version of myself who thought I needed their approval to be whole. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone I respect, someone I fought for, someone who lived. And maybe that's what freedom really is, not the absence of pain, but the choice to rise anyway. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to let it define who you are anymore. I lost my family the day they chose greed over love, but I found something stronger in the process, myself. So if you've ever been betrayed, if someone you trusted turned your world upside down, remember, you are not what they did to you. You are what you do after. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can choose peace. And if my story touched you, if it made you think, or even made you feel less alone, please like this video so more people can find it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that walking away from pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or even just a word of support, so drop a comment below. Let's talk about what family really means and what healing really looks like. And if you believe in stories that remind us how strong the human heart can be, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. I've got more stories that'll stay with you long after the screen goes dark. I'm Alyssa, and this was the story of how I lost everything just to find myself.